Hey, thanks for checking out Nuts and Bolts with Tone, and welcome to my channel. Today I have a 2008 6.4 Powerstroke. This is a cab chassis, but it's the same thing as a pickup. It comes out the same way. So if you look up the procedure for the oil pan, I'm going to be doing the lower oil pan and the upper oil pan. If you look up the procedure, they want you to take the turbo off. They want you to do all this work. You don't need to do any of that. Let me show you how to get in there and how to take this oil pan off without following all of the procedures of the manufacturer. Before I do that, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and hit the bell. You get notified of all my future content, which you're definitely going to want to see. Let me show you how to get that oil pan off. All right, so here we go. 6.4 08 Powerstroke. We're going to be replacing the oil pan gasket and the upper oil pan. All right, so I'm already doing a timing cover, so I've already got the stuff disconnected. But what you would do is you would disconnect the radiator, the two bolts on each side, so your radiator can lift up, because the fan shroud is attached to the radiator, and the fan clutch sits inside the fan shroud. And so what it does is when you jack up the motor, it'll lift up and not break anything. If you try to lift up this engine without doing that, you'll break the fan clutch and the fan shroud, and you could cause all kinds of problems. So we're going to show you this while we have this apart. We're going to be pulling off the lower oil pan, which is the black pan down here. And then that silver pan, that aluminum pan in between, is the upper oil pan. So we're gonna pull off the lower and the upper. When we lift this up, you can see these transmission cooler lines. So on the passenger side, there's a bolt right through here. You can see the bracket. We gotta disconnect that bolt so these cooler lines can move. And then we gotta jacket the motor, and we gotta unbolt this oil pan and get it out. I've already got all the front stuff off, so obviously I don't have to do anything with the radiator. So we're gonna be doing that, and let me get it in the air and show you what we're gonna do. Oh, the other thing that helps is if you go ahead and pull your dipstick up, you could take it out or just lift it up like 4 or 5 inches so it's not sticking down and getting in your way. It doesn't stick down too much, but it's just one of those things that you don't want to have to fight. So anytime you do an oil pan, it's always good, or tranny or anything, it's always good to pull your dipstick up, so that way it's out of the way. All right, let me get this thing lifted up. This is a big old giant truck. I'm gonna have to put a pole jack under the back because it's so big. All right, here we go. Okay, so what you gotta do is you gotta get a straight shot to the crank. And so in this case, I'm gonna go ahead and remove this steering damper right here, so I could come right up through here and hit it right there, because we gotta lift up the engine. So I'm gonna take that off, and then you gotta undo all 4 bolts on that side and 3 bolts on this side, so you can lift up the engine. So we can get access to all the bolts, get the oil pan out. And through this side here, if you go up through this hole, once we lift up the engine, we can get to the bracket for the tranny cooler lines. And then we gotta get all the bolts out and get the oil pan out. All right, so you can go through this hole right here to get the bracket off for the transmission cooler lines. And you're gonna undo the bolts, 4 on this side, 3 on this side, and then you're gonna lift up the engine about that much on both sides, just enough to get the oil pan dropped down so we can disconnect the pickup tube. So as you can see here, I had to put the balancer back on because I had it off for the timing cover. Before I did that, I went ahead and took out all the bolts that I could while nothing was in the way. I was able to just unbolt this steering stabilizer damper thing here and just fold it over here and get it out of the way. Came up right through here with a pole jack. All right, let me get this oil pan unbolted. Okay, so once you get the oil pan unbolted, you got the pickup tube right there. It's an 8mm on both sides. You just got to knock those bolts out and knock the oil pickup in the pan, and then the pan will slide out the back. All right, let me get these off, get this pan out. All right, so once you get the oil pan dropped down, you just unbolt the 2 8s and drop them down in the pan and drop your pickup tube. And when we put it back together, we're gonna lay the pickup tube in the pan and then reach up in there and connect it to the engine. So now you're gonna do the upper oil pan, and all it is a bunch of 8s around. Now the 2 bolts in the back, those 2 bolts in the back and the front are longer, and they thread all the way through both pans. So you're not gonna put those on. So you're just gonna look at what you have to do, which is all the interior bolts. It's about 10 bolts. All right, we're gonna get those out and get this upper pan off. All right, so two things I forgot to show you is one, the dipstick tube, you gotta disconnect that. There's a bolt up there. It's best to unbolt it up there before you drop it down. And then there's an 8mm bolt on top of the upper oil pan that the dipstick goes into. So once you've lifted it in the air, go ahead and take this bolt out. You've already taken that bolt out. You can pop the dipstick out so you're not trying to get it out while the upper oil pan is hanging. And the last thing is right there, the fuel lines bolt to the side of the upper oil pan. It's a 10mm bolt, so you got to get that out. All right, let me get everything cleaned up and I'll tell you how to torque all this. All right, so here we go. So here is the Molly kit for the upper and lower oil pan gaskets. All right, it looks like that. And I like to use a hammer like this to hammer the gasket in place. I've got everything cleaned up. All right, let me get this in the oil pans and I'll tell you about the torquing. All right, so here's the torque specs for the oil pan right there. All right, just make sure that you have it clean. And I like to use a Scotch-Brite pad with brake clean and scrub the surface and get it nice and beautiful. All right, good luck. All right, so in this video, I showed you how to take off that lower oil pan and that upper oil pan, and also how to reinstall it. Just make sure everything is really clean. It's all gaskets. There's no silicone needed. Thankfully, that's probably one of the toughest things is when you do any oil pan on anything. You've always got seams at the front cover, seams at the rear cover, but thankfully the way this is designed, there are no seams and no silicone. So it's just a matter of making sure you have everything clean and that you torque it all properly. I hope you feel comfortable doing this job now that you've seen me do it. It's definitely a lot harder to do on your back, but if you have a lift, it makes it a lot easier. So thanks for watching the video. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and hit the bell. You get notified of all my future content, which you're definitely going to want to see. Also check me out on Instagram at Nuts and Bolts with Tone for my daily life as a mechanic. Show you all kinds of cool stuff, show you tools in use, show you tools that I'm making a video about in the future. Show you cool stuff with gas and diesel. Also checking out my merchandise store where you can get yourself a t-shirt and a coffee cup. Support Nuts and Bolts channel. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.